Section B, 5-mark question. This appears over every single one of your papers. You get 1 in paper 1, 1 in paper 2, and then 2 in paper 3. That means you'll have to do it 4 times, and it will account for 20 marks over your entire A-level. Now, these 20 marks should be really simple. Why? Because this is a simple KAA question, knowledge, application, analysis. There are 0 marks for evaluation here. Okay, so now looking at the 5-mark question. So let's go to section B. I think this is 2022 paper. So we're on section B. The main thing to score well on this 5-mark question is analyse the question. So if you have a look at here, if you go down to the 5-mark question, so with reference to figure 1, explain one likely reason for the overall trend in the real prices of gas and electricity. So there are 3 variations you can get with this 5-mark question, which is the reason why I emphasised analysing what the command word is. So here, of course, the command word is explain, which is one of the main command words. I think around 90% of the time in these 5-mark questions, you are just going to get explain. Then a slight variation of explain is explain with a diagram. That's fairly self-explanatory, but we'll go into more detail. And then the rarest one is calculate. So the 3 main command words are explain, explain with a diagram, and then rarely, but you can get it, is calculate. Let's start with the calculate command word. So since the start of the spec, there has only been 2 5-markers which have started with the calculate command word, and I'll show you them here. So June 2022, paper 1, if we have a look through this, so this is currently section A, let's scroll down a bit. So here, so with reference to figure 1, calculate the 3 firm concentration ratio for branded coffee shops. Now, this is 100%, 1000% the easiest 5-mark question you're going to get, and it's just a simple calculation, but because it's so simple, students overcomplicate it way too much. So if you are blessed to get a calculate 5-mark question, do not overcomplicate it. Do not write any economic theory, any economic chains of analysis. All you need to get is the answer with the right units, and that is going to get you 5 marks. But of course, just general good practice for calculate questions is always show workings and make sure don't fall into any of the common mistakes, like if it's a percentage, put a percentage sign. If it's currency, make sure you use the right euros, pounds, dollars, whatever. And we can see this if you just look at the mark scheme. So June 2022 mark scheme. Quickly search the 5-marker, and yeah, so award 5 marks to the correct answer, 52.96. So all you need to do is get the answer there. A common thing students will do here, since this question might only take them a minute to calculate a 3 firm concentration ratio, they tend to waste 4 minutes just writing economics theory because they feel guilty for getting the answer that quick and want to make sure they have the marks. But remember, if it's a calculate question, as long as you've got the right figure, the right answer, you will get all the marks. Another example of this is June 2017, paper 2, I believe, and the question is here. With reference to figure 1, calculate the percentage change in the value of euros in pounds from the start of 2009 to the start of 2015. Now, yet again, it will be the same thing in the mark scheme. If you get the figure right, you will get all 5 marks. And let's have a look at that. So June 2017, let's quickly search the 5-mark question. Yeah, so here, award full marks for the correct answer, and they've even given a range here. So yeah, all you need to do for these calculate 5-mark questions, give the answer, do not waste any time writing economics theory, and you can bank that time you saved. So that is a surplus for your later answer questions. So you can spend that 4 minutes you've saved maybe on your 15-marker, on your 12-mark question, which is a massive advantage. In conclusion, if you get a 5-mark calculate question on your section B, remember you are blessed, and try to save as much time as possible. Do not waste any time on economics theory and move on and try to use that time in maybe a 12-mark question in a 15-mark question. Moving on to the explain command word. This is the one that is most likely to come up. I would say it's probably an 80% chance you're going to get the 5-marker on an explain command word. The way to pick up the marks here is firstly, start with defining key terms, as there's 1 mark for knowledge, then application, as there's 1 mark for application, so quote the data, quote the extract. Then your last 3 marks are just your analysis marks, so these are the marks you're going to pick up for explaining the concept. So whatever the question is, for explaining the question, you will pick up these marks. So to give you guys a little example, I'm going to have a shot at this 5-mark question. So with reference to figure 1 and the extract here, explain one likely reason for the change in the 4 firm concentration ratio of the supermarket sector between 2010 and 2015. Now, even if I didn't do economics, and I was a normal person, and you asked me why people aren't shopping at like Tesco, Morrison's, and are now shopping at the smaller supermarkets like Aldi and Lidl, I would probably tell you that it's cheaper. So just having a normal idea and just simply thinking about a lot of these questions will get you straight to the answer. A common theme you'll see with the 5 and the 8 mark questions, especially if your economics theory is solid, a lot of the time you won't actually need the extracts to give you the answer, you'll just know it in your head. But of course, even by just reading the question, if you know the answer, you still need to use the context, you still need to use the extracts. Why? Because you need to pick up those application marks. So let's try and look through these, and I'll show you exactly how I think about it. I have not looked at this yet. So again, what we're looking for, one reason for the change in the 4-firm concentration ratio of the supermarket sector. So let's go to the top. So obviously these are the figures, market shares. So if it's giving, so this is giving me the market share, I can use this to calculate the concentration ratio. That's 100% one thing I'm going to do, because I know that's going to be on the mark scheme, because it's asking me about the 4-firm concentration ratio. 100% that's going to be a question. There's going to be a few marks on the mark scheme. Proportion of food suppliers. Now, a massive tip with extracts is read the titles, and that's what I'm doing here. So I got that from the title and here. So proportion of food suppliers reporting to the following supermarkets. Now, my question was on the 4-firm concentration ratio and a reason for the change in the 4-firm concentration ratio. That means reading the title of that extract, it's probably not quite relevant to the answer I need. So I'm going to skip through that extract. Supermarket price wars put pressure on food suppliers. Now that's a bit more related to what I was thinking about, the way we're thinking about prices, a change in 4-firm concentration ratio. So I'm just going to quickly look over the other ones quickly. So extract B, food waste in the supply chain. That doesn't sound like it's very much to do with what I need. I'm thinking about the change in the concentration ratios. And so extract C, proposed merger activity. That kind of sounds related, but then if you have a little quick scan through it, it's a proposed merger. Proposed is the key word, so it hasn't actually happened yet. So it's not yet affected the 4-firm concentration ratio. So probably not as related. Probably not what we need for our 5-mark question. So yeah, I will go back to the extract here and we'll have a look through this. Now, just having a quick scan here. Looks like nothing much here. Price wars talk about prices decreasing. Then here, this is a really good paragraph. So market shares, big 4 supermarkets. Under pressure, yeah, here. So that is literally one of the, I'm definitely going to be using this in my application. So under pressure as shopping habits change, many consumers are switching from one weekly shop to more frequently at local discounts, Aldi, purchasing goods online at retailers. So yeah, that answers pretty much my question directly. And that is exactly how I would attack these extracts. Read through the titles and find the ones that are relevant to your question, and only spend your time rereading or just reading them. So let's actually try to answer this question now. So with reference, so obviously I've read the question. So always, whenever I answer a question, I follow this paragraph structure, which is state your point, application, analysis, link back to question. I've just made that acronym now, SAL, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so let me just move that out of the way. So explain what reason. So of course, like I said, the first mark is going to be knowledge. So what is a key term in here? So it probably would be 4-firm concentration ratio. So I'd start this off by just 4-firm concentration ratio. The way I define that is just the percentage / amount of market share made up by the 4 largest firms in the market. So there, bang. So that would be 1 mark there. That would be my knowledge mark. So sorry for my handwriting's a bit terrible, but 4-firm concentration ratio is the amount or percentage of market share made up by the 4 largest firms in the market. So I've just neatened that up so you can actually read it and how I would write it in the exam. So that is my definition. So like I said, that's going to pick me up my 1 knowledge mark. Now let's go back to the paragraph structure. So stating my point, and if you want to see this whole paragraph structure, it'll be linked down below. It's a perfect paragraph structure video on my channel. But so yeah, now state my point. So state your point, you need to answer the question directly. The question is asking, explain 1 likely reason for the change in 4-firm concentration ratio. So what I'm going to say, I'm going to reuse as many words in the question as possible. So one reason for the change in 4-firm con. And the reason I'd give, if we just have a quick peek back at the extract, consumers are switching away from basically the large firms to local discount stores such as Aldi. So I'm going to say, one reason for the change in the 4-firm concentration ratio is consumers are substituting away. Consumers are substituting away from large incumbent firms to discount stores. okay, so that's my point. So basically just saying consumers are substituting away. So that is my S part. So I've stated my point there. Now, like I said, in your 5 markers, 1 mark is reserved for application. So where am I going to get this application from? So the application needs to prove my point. It needs to prove why consumers are substituting away from the 4 firms. So anything can go here, sorry. So many consumers switching from and even at the start of the extract here, so shopping habits are changing. So I probably would, and this is just an example of how I would do it. So I would say, as shown in the extract, it says consumer shopping habits are changing, or you can literally even quote this this line here, so line 14 I believe. So consumers they're shopping more frequently at local discount stores. Anything like that would work, and it'd pick you up the application mark. So now that's our knowledge and application marks done. I would say that's the harder part. Now it's just a simple chains of analysis, which if you know your economics theory, it's quite easy, because this is literally asking you, why are consumers substituting away from high cost expensive shops to discount stores? And that is very simple economics theory. So I've quickly just jotted down a few chains of analysis as quick as possible. Sorry if the handwriting's really poor. But so I've just said consumers are substituting away from the large firms, the expensive firms like Tesco. I mean that Tesco sales, revenues, profits decreasing, and basically this increased demand is shifting towards Aldi. Therefore Tesco's and all the big fours market share is decreasing, whilst Aldi, Lidl's market share is increasing. And since the question, what I actually realised, since the question is directly asking you for the change in the 4 firm concentration ratio between 2010 and 2015, that's probably very valid, and it will be marks on the mark scheme for you to quote. So let's quickly see where we can work that out. Yeah, so I'm not going to do that here just for time's sake, but I would go on to work out Tesco's, Asda's, Sainsbury's, Morrison's 4 firm concentration ratio in 2010 versus 2015, and then quote it and write it down in the 5 mark question, and that itself will easily pick you up 1 to 2 marks. Now let's have a quick check what the mark scheme is saying. So let's quickly go to the 5 mark question. So here, like I was mentioning earlier, 1 mark knowledge, 1 mark application, 3 marks analysis, 1 mark for definition and understanding concentration ratio. The reason they say understanding is since that some phrases, some words in economics don't have a set definition, and it's more about showing the examiner you understand how it's used, and you'd pick up the knowledge mark there. So application, yeah, so like I said, 1 mark for a reason. So any bit of application that backs up your point, basically. So changing shopping habits. Yeah, basically there's lots of different things here. Analysis, so that's already 2 marks picked up there. Now we've got 3 marks left. Award further marks for link development. Yep, so discount shops, so sales have risen. Yeah, perfect. And like I said here at the end, the 4 firm concentration ratio decrease. Like I said, yeah, that's one thing I said to calculate at the end. And as you can see, there's 2 marks there for analysis. So we would be scoring there 5 out of 5 for our 5 mark question. And finally, the last command word you can get in a 5 mark question is explain with a diagram. Explain with a diagram is pretty much exactly the same as an explain question, but you just need general good diagram technique, like making sure to label your axes, the shifts, making sure to use your diagram into your chain of analysis, and it makes it a lot easier to pick up the 5 marks when you have a diagram. So I think that this is actually quite an easy question, as long as you avoid the trivial silly mistakes like messing up your diagram. I've got an example here in 2020 June paper 1, refer to figure 1, explain the likely effect of a change in the subsidy levels between 2017 and 2018 on rail fares. Include a supply and demand diagram in your answer. So this is how it's going to be asked. We'll do the same thing, we'll have a shot of this together. So refer to figure 1, it says, so with questions like this where they explicitly tell you which figure to refer to, it makes it a bit easier as well. So let's have a look at figure 1. I would still have a quick snoop at these figures, but for time's sake we'll just look at figure 1. So UK government subsidy, again it's a really good title. So it shows, so the question is asking us the likely effect of the change in the subsidy level. So they haven't specified, but now if we look at figure 1 and interpret figure 1, we see the original subsidy is 277 million, and then the subsidy in 2018 is 287 million, meaning that the subsidy has actually increased. So how would we show this increase of the subsidy on a diagram? In this question, I believe you could show it 2 ways. Of course, you could show it the normal way, which is just the supply curve shifting out, thus showing the subsidy. But since in this question, if you read the question very closely, it says there has been a change. I can't select my answer, but it says there has been a change in the subsidy levels. And if we look at the figure, there is actually originally a subsidy. So there was a subsidy and the subsidies increased. So I'm pretty sure in the mark scheme that it will also be valid throwing 3 demand curves. So showing the subsidy before and then the increased subsidy. I don't think you'll need to do that, and you can just get away with a simple subsidy diagram, so just shifting the supply curve out once. But if you really wanted to, you could shift out the supply curve 2 times. So the original supply curve, then the subsidy before, and then the subsidy after. And if that sounded really technical to you, do not worry. You do not need to do that to pick up the marks, but I'm sure that's what a few people might have been thinking. So let's have a shot at this. Of course, y-axis would be price, x-axis would be quantity, then we have our supply curve, and if it is the exam, I would be writing each of them out. So don't just write S and D, write supply, demand, and then you shift your supply out to S plus subsidy, and then of course you can label on a few things. I would label on the equilibriums, PQE, P1, and then of course, what does the subsidy show? The subsidy shows that prices are decreasing and quantity supplied would be increasing. So let's just label that up. So quantity supplied is increasing, and depending on how much depth you've learned the subsidy diagram in, of course, what's a massive thing that the subsidy diagram does show, you can label up the consumer surplus, the producer surplus here as well, if you're confident with it. So I'm just going to shrink this a bit just so we can write a few chains of analysis, since I remember back to when I was a student, the reason why I'm giving so many examples, I still really love seeing examples, but not a lot of people give them, so I do try to give as many examples as possible, but I might be going a bit overkill. So I always would still stick to my same paragraph structure. So state your point, application, analysis, link back to question. So what is my point going to be here? Let me reread the question. Explain the likely effect of the change in subsidy levels between 2017 and 2018. So let me think. What is a likely effect of a change in the subsidy levels? But as we know now, after interpreting the diagram, it's not a change. Well, it is a change, but it's an increase. So what is the likely effect of an increase in a subsidy on rail fares? And as we can actually see by the diagram, when we have a subsidy, how does it affect the price of the rail fares? Price decreases from PE to P1, so that would be my point. And like I said, all these questions are still built upon your economic theory. You need to know your economic theory needs to be solid for you to be able to build those connections and build that bridge between the context and the answer. So the way I would word it is one likely effect of a change in subsidy levels. Change in subsidy level is a decrease in price of rail fares. Now, what application can I give here about the change in subsidy levels? Again, you need to use your context there. So let's look back to the context. So we have a change, that's pretty simple. So we have a change from 287 to 277. I will just work out the difference between them two, which is, I think, 9.9 million, if I'm correct. I'm not very good at maths. Sorry, you will obviously have a calculator. It is, the subsidy does rise 10.9 million from 77 to 87.9. Now, we've stated that point here, so we complete S, and we come to the application stage of the paragraph. So we need to find some application to back this up, an application about the change in the subsidy level. So of course, we would go back to our context, I'd go back to the same figure. So what is the difference here? I'll just literally calculate the change in 287.9, take away 207, that is 10.9 million, I believe. And that is pretty much exactly what I would quote. I would say between 2017 and 2018, and I'll show you how I'd do that. So I would literally say between 2017 and 2018, the level of subsidy has risen 10.9 million. And now, like I said, this is the easy part. This is where you just rattle off your economic chains of analysis, and with a diagram it's even easier. You're just basically explaining what a subsidy does. So it shifts out the supply curve, so it decreases producer's cost of supplying, thus shifting out the supply curve, thus decreasing prices, increasing quantity. You can talk about consumer, producer surplus, etc, etc. And there's loads to speak about to pick up those last few chains of analysis marks. Okay, so that's pretty much what I would write for the chains of analysis. So just quickly run through it. Subsidy, and by the way, as long as your economic theory is correct, you can go about it in pretty much any way you want to. But this is how I would do it. A subsidy decreases producer's cost of production, shifting the supply curve from S to S plus sub. And like I said, you've drawn a diagram. You need to make sure you include it in your chains of analysis. And this is exactly how you do it. You keep on quoting it. You explain the diagram in a step-by-step manner. So this causes the supply curve to shift from S to S plus sub. this decreases the cost, and this decrease in costs can be passed on to consumers, which is shown from PE to P1, again quoting the diagram, resulting in lower rail fares for consumers and also an increase in quantity from QE to Q1. And if I could be bothered, I would end this by pretty much writing that there's also an increase in consumer surplus since there is a lower price, and probably a mention of producer surplus. And that is more than enough to grant those 5 marks. So sorry, let's have a quick look at the mark scheme. 5-mark question. So let's see what it's saying. So still same breakdown for the marks. Like it says, 2k marks reserved for accurate diagram. So making sure you've added everything onto the diagram, Q1 to Q2, demand, subsidy shifting to S+2, whatever you want to label it. That is subsidy. That explanation that subsidy increase is a rise in financial assistance or a cut in cost of production. Basically what we've said there, which is another 2 marks, and then cost passed on to consumers. Also mentioned that results in a fall in the rail fare application. Also, that's another mark. So we mentioned that as well. So subsidy rises around, I really can't read English today, but subsidy rises around 11 million, which we quoted as being around, yeah, we quoted a bit more of an approximate figure, which is 10.9 million. But yeah, like I said, more than enough for 5 marks there. And if you do get a diagram question, if it tells you to include a diagram, it should be really easy and quite simple to pick up those 5 marks. In conclusion, we will wrap it up with a bit of timing advice. So these are a 5-mark question, and like I said, try to aim for a minute a mark. And especially if you get a bit of an easy 5-mark question, like one of these diagrams questions, they might only take you 3 to 4 minutes. And especially like a calculation question, I know there's only been 2 ever in the spec, but there is a possibility for the year you're sitting your exam, it could come up. And if a question like that does come up, like I said, do not waste time on economics theory, get the calculation right and move on, and use that time bank, use that surplus, spend it on a 12 or 15 marker. Anyway, I hope this video helped.